This presentation is about strategies adults can use to support social emotional development in young children. Did you know that in a survey of parents from the organization 0 to 3 found that 43% of parents believe that children could control their emotions by the age of 3? Some of the research has indicated that families and caregivers demonstrate less understanding of when children are capable of reaching social and emotional milestones than cognitive or physical ones. This lack of understanding may lead adults to having unrealistic expectations for young children and ultimately lead to frustration. The emotional health of young children, or the absence of it, is closely tied to the social and emotional characteristics of the environments in which they live, which include not only their parents, but also the broader context of their families and communities. So, what is social emotional development? Let's start with defining them separately. Social emotional development refers to the process by which a child learns to interact with others around them. As they develop and perceive their own individuality within their community, they also gain skills to communicate with other people and process their actions, as well as learn how to handle conflict with peers. And it is culturally driven. And what that means is children learn based upon their family how they should respond to how they should interact with others. For example, children always social reference or look to you when someone says hello. And so they may look at you to see if it's safe. Am I supposed to say hello? Am I supposed to respond to that? And so it's important that we help children understand how they are to respond. And we learn that first from our own family. And so oftentimes you may have a child come into a childcare program, and when someone greets them and say hello, the child doesn't say hello back. And then that can be seen as being defiant, when really it's them trying to figure out, hey, I don't know if I'm supposed to respond or not. So it's important that we understand that culture, everything children learn to do socially and emotionally is culturally driven, is based upon their family. And when I say culturally driven, that means ways of being. So how should I be when I'm in contact with other people? When we think about emotional development, it involves learning what feelings and emotions are, understanding how and why they occur, recognizing your own feelings and those of others, and developing effective ways for managing those feelings. Emotional development is biologically driven and culturally influenced. And when you think about babies first being born, they come out, and if they don't cry, we get concerned. And so babies crying is a way to get them to attach to adults or adults to attach to them. And so the key here is that those things are not mastered. They have to be nurtured and taught. And so once we outwardly help children regulate by holding them, soothing them, acknowledging their feelings and emotions, meeting their needs when they cry and if they're hungry, or meeting their needs because they want to be held, then we teach children to learn to regulate. They say, this is a good space. These are good people. They're here to help me. So when they talk to me, then I know they're going to make things happen. And so the child starts to regulate. And that's important to understand, because these things are not masked. They're not by age. It really is about mastery. And so we have to know, as adults, we have to help children manage emotions externally first before they can actually internalize how to do those things. Social and emotional overall really is the capacity of the child from birth through 5 years of age to be able to form close and secure adult and peers, form close and secure relationships with peers, experience, regulate, and express emotions in a socially and culturally appropriate way, explore the environment, and learn all in the context of family, community, and culture. Surprisingly, young children are capable of expressing deep and intense feelings of sadness, including depression, grief, anxiety, and anger, which can result in unmanageable aggression, in addition to heights of joy and happiness for which they're better known. And I think oftentimes we think, for example, that when something's going on in the world, that children can't feel it. When you are sad, they know something's wrong. They may not know the start of it, but they do feel it because they're watching you. And so we have to understand that they are capable of being sad. So when they say they're sad, we really need to honor that and know that when children say that they're sad, they really mean it. And so just because they're 1 or 2 or 3 years old doesn't mean their feelings should not be acknowledged. And so as adults, we have to make sure that we do acknowledge their emotions. And it really is about the foundation, which is relationships. And we know that healthy social and emotional development starts with attachment. So having a bond or attachment to an adult is critical to children's mental health as well as their social and emotional development. And why does this matter? Because building social and emotional skills are critically important for lifelong mental wellness, achieving academic success and career success, and enhancing social connections. So when children learn to regulate themselves, for example, they see their friend and they really, really want to hug their friend, but their friend doesn't really like to be hugged, and they learn to regulate themselves, they're more likely to continue that friendship. And so we have to help kids learn how to be in the context when they're in the presence of other people. And so it's sort of like, when we greet others, we have to kind of determine, will this person accept a hug? Will they want a pound? Do they just want a wave? And so the way we learn to do it, most of us, is we ask the question. So is it okay if I hug you? You might put your hand out and you might, signal that you want a handshake. And again, we have to think about culture. And so in Western culture, we are taught to look each other in the eye, stand up straight, give a firm handshake, where some cultures that's inappropriate. So we have to really recognize that and help children be able to read that environment and those cues to be able to do that. We all want a sense of belonging. And so it's critical that we give children the skills so they can feel a part of the group and have a sense of belonging. So some notes, and I just mentioned a couple of the kind of cultural expectations, but it's also important to recognize the role that culture plays in behavior. Every family has a set of rules that they have for their family and how they want their child to be seen or behave. And so we also have to understand that the acceptability of behaviors often is culturally determined. So for example, behaviors like talking while other person's talking or calling out in response to a question, like for example, some African American children, when they go to church, in the African American church, there's some call and response. The pastor may say something and then the congregation responds. And so if you think about group time in childcare, the teacher is saying things like, singing a song or talking about a particular topic, and the child just says, I get that, or I understand that. That's something my grandma does. And oftentimes the teacher will get upset because it isn't the child's turn. So it's important that we understand those kinds of expectations based upon how children are and ways of being in their community, because they can be seen as a challenge behavior. But also when we talk about making eye contact, and again, in the early childhood field, we're taught to get on the child's level, look them in the eye. And so when a child does not do that, then it is seen as being disrespectful. So we have to understand why the child may not be giving us eye contact. And we have to know that those things, again, are influenced by culture. And when I say culture, again, I mean ways of being. So how should I be? How should I carry myself? Do I carry myself at school like I do at home? Do I carry myself like I do at school, in church, or in the synagogue, or in the temple? And so we have to know how the families of the children, what their expectations are. When there's a mismatch, however, between the culture of the child and the culture of those adults who may be caring for them, the adults may perceive the child's behavior as challenging. Expectations and rules can help children to crack the code about different ways to behave in different situations. So helping children understand what the rules are. So we can't just expect that if they go from their house to Grammy's house, that those rules are the same. So, we have to teach them what the rules are in the different spaces. So how should they be when they go to the grocery store? How should I interact? Should I keep my hand on the cart, or can I just kind of walk in front of the cart? or do I have to sit in the cart? And so all of those things, if we can help children and teach children those expectations, then children will less likely to exhibit challenging behaviors. And it's also critical to focus on respect and relationships with all children. Adults should monitor their own behavior to make sure they are responding to the children fairly and consistently. And again, not picking on the child that doesn't meet how you do things, but making sure that you try to understand what the child is being taught. And just because they're being taught something different doesn't mean that how they're taught is wrong. It just may not align with how you were taught or what your expectations are. So let's look at some strategies that can support healthy social emotional development in young children. So when we talk about supporting healthy social emotional development in infants and toddlers, we want to think about matching our caregiving to the temperament of the child. So if we have a child who is really fearful of different people or change, then we have to adjust our ways of being for them. We always expect children to adjust, but we really remember they're learning. So we should be able to take ownership of that and adjust ourselves. One of the things I do when I meet a new baby is I don't necessarily give them eye contact. I will initially say hello and then I'll look away. And then I might wave to them or talk to them from the side just to show the child that I am not a threat. And so I never get into the child's face. I kind of approach them. I also ask permission because oftentimes we're so used to just kind of grabbing the baby and saying hello. I think about my own 7-month-old grandchild, and in the midst of the pandemic, we can't see them as often. So I didn't get to see her from the very beginning. And so now we're trying to build this relationship. And so I have to be mindful of that. Just because I'm her grandmother doesn't mean I have the right to just kind of get into her space. And so we have to adjust ourselves. And then understand that emotions expressed by infants and toddlers are true feelings, seeking responsive care from responsive adults. So when children are crying, they are trying to communicate something. If children are having a tantrum, they are trying to communicate something. So it's important for us to acknowledge that, to label those emotions, to help children work through those emotions, because remember, they're learning how to do it. They're learning their regulation. It may not be perfect at the beginning, but the more responsive we are, the more consistent we are, the less likely they will express those emotions as strong. We also want to mirror those expressions. So if an infant or a toddler is crying, you want to frown. So matching your facial expression to the words. So you may say something like, "You seem so upset. I'm going to help you." And so that gives children not only just what faces look like when they see it, but also the words that match. And so when we think about, again, adding those words to facial expression, really just helping them to build that vocabulary. You're smiling. "Oh, you seem so happy today." Or even when you're feeding the baby, you say things like, "Oh, that must taste so wonderful. I really love green beans too." And so you're just really acknowledging those emotions, you're labeling those emotions. And so you're building that vocabulary. You're also building the pictures on the walls of children's minds. So when you use the term happy, they get a visual of what happy is. And so you can also use books, music, and puppets and finger plays to support the children's emotions and their emotional vocabulary. So having pictures around, you can cut out pictures out of magazines and point to the baby's facial expressions or the mom's facial expressions or the dad's facial expressions. You can create a little emotional picture book to extend children's vocabulary. You can also model and use words that older toddlers can use when they're playing. So you're kind of talking out what they're doing. You're also pointing out their peers' emotions. So look, oh, Johnny's crying. He really misses his mother. And so helping children understand and be able to take different perspectives. And I think that's also where we help children to develop empathy and compassion and kind of think about how our interactions can impact someone else. And so that's important for us to be able to do that. So to really get them to think about how others feel, what they may feel if we do something. So it's important that we teach those skills. So for preschool children, we want to make sure that we choose books that talk about friendship, cooperation, helping each other, expressing emotions, and talking about empathy. And then also having opportunities for children or preschool children to practice sharing and taking turns. And it's really in the context of them helping you that they learn to share and take turns. So for example, if they want a crayon that their peer has, you may say things like, here, I'm going to share my crayon. And that actually teaches kids how to share. And then model talking about your own emotions and how you're feeling in the moment. And then supporting children who are talking about their emotions. So again, it's important that we talk about that. When you hear kids say, I'm sad, we don't just say, oh, that's just too bad. You have to say, oh, you're sad. Sometimes I feel sad too. So what's making you sad? And so when you're reading the books about emotions, you can kind of ask them, so what are some things that make you sad? What are some things that make you happy? What are things that make you frustrated? And so again, that builds the child's individual vocabulary. And so when they are engaging with others, they have conflict, they're able to express how they feel. Using visual props or large pictures can also help children in supporting them with their social skill development. So how to greet each other. It may be, you know, Jonathan doesn't like hugs. He doesn't like you in his personal space, but he does like high five, or he likes a pound. Can you give him a pound? So having props and things and visual pictures to help children learn how to greet one another. And then giving them praise for when they do it. When you see them doing it, just say, you, not just a good job, but label exactly what they did. I like it that you went and gave Janessa her blanket when she was feeling sad. You're such a good friend. You were showing great empathy toward Janessa. So just really making sure that you acknowledge it, because children love to be praised, and good job doesn't explain what they did, so they can't do it again. So we have to be very specific and provide that positive feedback. And then be responsible for children's attempt to use social skills or express emotions. Remember, it takes practice. We don't all get it right the first time. So we want to praise them when children are, understand that given the right triggers, given the right moment, we all could go from being really, really happy to being really, really sad. And sometimes we might raise our voice at each other and we didn't really mean it. So we have to think about that for young children when they are really working hard to understand what the rules are here on this earth. You know, we just expect that children come out with a book knowing how to do all these things. They have to be taught these things. And I always tell people, telling is not teaching. We have to teach children and then give them opportunities to mess up, opportunities to practice. So as they grow, they actually have the tools. As their social circles become bigger, then they're more likely to be able to handle what comes with that. And then I think the biggest is really just validating those feelings. You know, instead of, you know, if your child is you have to leave your child in the care of someone else, you just kind of, when the child turns, you just kind of leave. Remember, I started out talking about relationships are important. They can't trust you if you're always running away. So it's important that you acknowledge that you're leaving, that you're coming back. And that helps children to actually regulate themselves. They actually cry less, but that takes time. And then encourage children to express their thoughts and share their feelings about stories and situations. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, you know, ask children how they feel. Like if you lost your bunny, how would you feel? Or if someone took something from you, how would you feel? You know, what do you feel about the rain? It's raining today. So just giving children opportunities to really process, to really think, to have the opportunity to problem solve, because it's not so much about expressing the emotions, it's about what you do with the emotions. And so we have to acknowledge the emotions, we have to learn what we should do with those emotions before we do it. And so that's what children need opportunities to be able to do. So practice helps them to do that. And one other way that we can support children's social emotional development is through, if you are a program, is really through program-wide implementation. And that's called the pyramid model. And so in Wisconsin, We use the pyramid model as a framework for implementing a culturally responsive and equitable multi-level system of supports that's designed to enhance the social and emotional competence of young children, promote the development of program policies and practices to support those skills, and provide early care and education providers with the practice-based coaching, so they also get support to ensure that the evidence-based practices are integrated and used to fidelity. And we know that if the whole program does it, the more likely they are to sustain it. And so the pyramid model was designed by the Center of on the social and emotional foundations of early learning, and is based on what research tells us about best practices in supporting the social and emotional development of young children. And so, like I said before, the pyramid model is a framework. It is not a curriculum for planning how we support young children in developing social and emotional competence. And it's meant for all children and that have need. All children have needs that are addressed within the framework. And implementing the pyramid model takes time and work. So if programs want to take that on, it is important to know that it does take time. It's not an instant fix, it's a long term. The goal is to be long-term and sustainable. And so what are some benefits of going program-wide if a program decides to do so? It reduces challenge behavior. It increases children's social skills. It increases satisfaction of program staff and families. There is considerable reduced turnover in the program. It increases the teacher's confidence and competence and confidence in the in support of children. There's changes in the classroom and program climate, and then it's sustained implementation of the pyramid model. So those strategies, if given the opportunity to go program-wide, it actually changes that environment for everyone. So what are some key social emotional skills that children need to be successful in school? They need to have confidence, right? So the first day of school, you need to have the confidence to walk in and say, I can do it. The capacity to develop good relationships with peers and adults. So children need to know how to navigate those different peer relationships. So how should I be when I'm with my peers? How should I be in the company of adults? It actually helps when children have the ability to concentrate and stick to it, or persistence on challenging tasks. And we know sometimes we can just give up, but when we support healthy development of social emotional skills, it actually helps children to persist, to know that they can still do it even though it's hard. And then also the ability to effectively communicate emotions. So helping kids know how to regulate it. So they may be upset because they didn't get a turn on the computer, but they learned they can do some other things while someone else is on the computer. So helping them to regulate themselves, to be able to have delayed gratification is important for school success. And then the ability to listen to instructions and be attentive. And then lastly, ability to solve social problems. We all know we can be socially awkward sometimes. We don't know how, until we develop those relationships, how we are to respond and interact with others. So it's important that children understand that. So you may have children who are very huggy. They love to hug everyone. So they're walking around trying to get a hug from everybody. And the other child is like, no, I don't want it. So they need to be able to read those body cues and those facial cues to know, oh, I need to stop myself. He or she said stop, so I need to stop. So that's really the goal of these strategies to support children in developing these skills. And it is also important how you respond, also to know that how you respond also teaches. So some things to kind of think about. So when a child shows a strong emotion, you want to think, did I label that emotion? Did I acknowledge why they feel that way? Did I keep my voice and tone and body language understanding? So again, did you as the adult regulate yourself? And then did you assist children in becoming more regulated? So we also have to take some responsibility in how we respond to challenging behavior. So we have to check ourselves first. So it's important that if you are asking children not to blurb out or yell or shout, then you have to make sure as the caregiver, the teacher, the provider, that you do not blurt out. So we model those things. So a lot of us have to also learn how to regulate ourselves just as much. And then always remember, It can be really tough to remember how emotionally immature children are because they can be so impressively intelligent, capable, and aware. When they seem deliberately bratty or downright mean, we'll need to remind ourselves these are tiny people with incredibly low impulse control who are very easily overwhelmed. In the moment, it may feel like our kids are out to get us, but it is actually their impulses have gotten the better of them. And so we have to remember that we have to teach children, and it takes time, and they have to learn to regulate. And we have to remember that telling is not teaching. If you would like more information on how to support the healthy social emotional development of young children, please visit us at www.wiamh.org. So the Wisconsin Alliance for Mental Infant Health. Thank you.